Hey everybody, today we're going to be running through the Bulk Publishing AI WordPress plugin. It's a very simple tool to use, but I'm just going to run you through a few features and then we're going to generate some articles. So the first thing you'll notice once you've put your license key in is the settings page. And this is where we set the model settings for each of our variables. And variables are the different headings that you'll see on the main sheet. Any heading that has this edit icon next to it is a prompt that you can edit. So you've got the title, secondary keywords, outline, introduction, and first draft. These can all be modified individually. And soon we'll be able to add our own variables as well as import CSV and play around with individual prompts a lot more. But back over to the settings page. As you can see, we'll have different settings for each variable. So for your first draft, if you're using GPT-4, you can up your max tokens quite a bit. If you're using GPT 3.5, you're going to need to bring these down to around 2,000 tokens. So I am using GPT-4, and this is, of course, the GPT-4 API. This is not ChatGPT Pro or Plus. You have to have access to the GPT-4 API. I always use GPT-4 for my first draft because I can get a long form article. There is, in the knowledge base, there is information on the different temperature settings, top P, frequency penalty, presence penalty. These are drawn directly from OpenAI, but I have included some information if you do need help understanding what these settings are and what you might want to put them at. Going back over to the title prompt, this again, I'm using GPT-4. I find the GPT-4 titles to be a lot better, but for max tokens, we don't need that many. So rather than risk it doing too much, we will just limit those to 120 tokens. Temperature, you can up or lower. If you want it to be more creative, you're going to up that temperature, but it doesn't matter too much. I just choose something between 8 and 9.5. Frequency penalty, presence penalty, I think they can go up to 2. So if you don't want your article repeating itself, these are the ones you will be playing around with. And secondary keywords, these can be GPT 3.5. These don't need to be anything special. A lot of the times you're going to want to be pasting your own additional keywords in as data-driven keywords, so you might not be generating your own related keywords, but it is still an opportunity to add some semantically related or contextually related keywords that you can use throughout your article. Outline, I prefer the GPT-4 outlines. Again, we don't need it to be too long, so we can reduce this, or 500 seems to be okay. And it's also based on the prompt. So your max tokens are going to be taking into consideration the length of your prompt on the front end. So you don't want to make this 100 tokens because it's going to have trouble trying to read the data you've given it and make an outline. It probably will give you an error. And then the introduction, same, I'm using GPT-4 for everything except for secondary keywords for obvious reasons. So let's go straight over to the sheet. I already have some values here, so I'm going to check the article first. And I'll probably just publish it so I can clear the sheet. It's going to create the article in Classic Editor. This looks like it's... It does this sometimes, so I've told it to put the headings in HTML. So it's done a H2, then it's done a H3, then it's done a H4, and it's gone smaller and smaller to the lowest, and then it's just gone to plain text. So I could sit down and edit this, but I'm lazy, so I'm going to get it to do it again. So I'm just going to close it. And I've upped the tokens. Did I save it? Always need to make sure you save your settings. I didn't save it, so I'm going to make this 4,000. I'm going to leave everything else as it is. Go back over to the sheet. Now what happens is your introduction, once you've generated your introduction, you generate your first draft. The introduction is going to be injected into the first draft. So Before it was just sitting there and we had to copy and paste it in, and now we've updated it. And when you generate your first draft, it's going to put the introduction in the beginning of the text. So that does mean that if your outline is has something like understanding the concept, this first heading is going to be like an introduction. So when you go to, you can either remove that first heading because this has now become a common outline thing. So we would look to remove that. And don't worry if it looks like these are all bundled together. It knows where the title ends and begins. So it understands this is an outline and it's not going to be confused about the look of it. But what I was saying was when it generates the first draft, even if you tell it not to include an introduction. So as you can see, I've got quite a long prompt here. But I think I've told it not to include an introduction somewhere. And sometimes it will take that into consideration. Other times it will still write an introduction. So something you need to be aware of when you go to submit your post, you need to look at it and make sure it doesn't put an introduction and then say under the first subheading, in this post we're going to talk about, because it's done it twice. So I'm just going to save this to make sure everything is updated. And then now I'm going to click here and generate column. If you're using GPT 3.5, it's going to be super fast. If you're using GPT-4, it can sometimes be quite slow. The rings should stop spinning when the article is done, and you should get a pop-up to say it's complete. Sometimes it doesn't do that, which is a bug we're still working on, but it still does produce your article. So when I clear this sheet, once I've submitted these posts and I start a new one, you'll see, or hopefully you don't see it, but if you have the plugin or if you get the plugin and you notice that it's spinning for a while and the button is still not highlighted, you can still actually click on the button and it will go to the first draft and you'll see that it's written the whole article. So that is, I'd say, a cosmetic bug that we're working to fix, but it does produce the article. So it's not a functional bug is what I'll say. Over here, you can click to upload your featured image. And soon we will have AI integrated images so you can generate or upload your featured image. Of course, it won't have text on it. So if you are still using Canva or any other tool to create your featured images and you put text on top of them, you're still going to want to upload. But this is the only method. So if you've got a bunch of articles, you still need to click individually, choose file, choose file, choose file, unless you're doing it in the back end and attaching them some other way. This is the method that we've got. View post and edit post, pretty much the same thing. Once the post is done, you can click and view it. But this is going to be a preview of the actual post rather than the back end edit of it.